The quiet hum of a summer afternoon, a gentle breeze rustling through the leaves, or perhaps the steady rhythm of a train crossing the countryside. These are the moments that often lend themselves to introspection, to the contemplation of lives lived long ago. We are about to embark on a journey, not to the grand halls of power or the celebrated studios of renowned masters, but to the quieter, often overlooked corners of early 20th century American life. We will explore the world of men and women who carried their art, their tools, and their hopes from town to town, offering glimpses of themselves, their families, and their aspirations in painted form. This is the story of the itinerant portrait artists, a fascinating cohort whose lives, though seldom chronicled in the dramatic sweep of history, offer a unique window into American society, commerce, and the persistent human desire to be remembered. To truly understand how this vibrant, if sometimes precarious, profession came to be, we must first examine the fertile ground from which it sprang. The turn of the 20th century in America was a period of profound transformation, a time of rapid industrialization, burgeoning cities, and a shifting social landscape. Yet, amidst this whirlwind of progress, much of the nation still operated at a pace that allowed for personal connection and local economies. In the countless towns and villages that dotted the vast American expanse, from the dusty plains of the Midwest to the rolling hills of New England, life often revolved around community events, agricultural cycles, and the enduring traditions of family and faith. It was within this context that the practice of portraiture, once the exclusive domain of the wealthy and the aristocracy in European courts, began to filter down, becoming accessible to a broader segment of the American population, albeit through the hands of those who traveled to meet them. These itinerant portrait artists were a distinct group, occupying a unique space between the formal art world, with its established academies and galleries, and the everyday lives of ordinary Americans. They were entrepreneurs, artisans, and often keen observers of human nature. Their businesses were not built on gallery sales or commissions from wealthy patrons who could afford the considerable sums charged by metropolitan artists. Instead, their livelihood depended on their ability to move, to connect with people in their own homes, their businesses, and their community gathering places. They advertised their services through local newspapers, posted notices in general stores, and relied heavily on word-of-mouth referrals. Their canvases were often smaller, their techniques adapted for speed and portability, and their prices carefully calibrated to appeal to the aspirations of farmers, shopkeepers, small-town professionals, and the growing middle class. The economic realities of the time played a significant role in shaping this profession. For many artists, particularly those who had received some formal training but lacked the connections or the capital to establish themselves in major art centers like New York, Chicago, or Boston, itinerancy offered a viable path to earning a living. It was a way to escape the intense competition and the often prohibitive costs of studio rental and materials in the city. For the subjects, too, the appeal was clear. A painted portrait offered a tangible legacy, a way to immortalize oneself and one's family, a symbol of status and accomplishment, even in modest circumstances. In an era before widespread photography became both affordable and ubiquitous, a painted likeness held a unique and profound significance. While early photography was certainly available, it often lacked the artistic interpretation and personal touch that a skilled painter could provide. Furthermore, the process of sitting for a painted portrait, though less demanding than the elaborate sittings of the past, still imbued the subject with a sense of occasion and importance. The artists themselves were a diverse group. Some were formally trained, having attended art schools for varying periods, absorbing the fundamentals of drawing, perspective, and color theory. Others were largely self-taught, their skills honed through relentless practice and an innate talent for capturing likeness. Many possessed a practical understanding of chemistry, particularly concerning the pigments and binders used in oil paints, ensuring their work would endure. Their toolkits were essential: portable easels, a carefully selected range of brushes, tubes of oil paint, linseed oil, turpentine, varnishes, and often a selection of pre-primed canvases or prepared wooden panels. The logistics of travel were paramount. Many artists utilized horse-drawn wagons or buggies, later transitioning to automobiles as they became more common. These vehicles served as mobile studios, storage for supplies, and living quarters when necessary. They became a familiar sight in rural communities. The arrival of the picture man, a welcome event. The process of creating a portrait for an itinerant artist was a finely tuned operation. Upon arriving in a town and securing a suitable arrangement, often by lodging with a local family or renting a temporary space, the artist would begin their outreach. This might involve a period of observation, of getting a feel for the community, and then making their presence known. Advertising was crucial. Handbills, flyers, and small advertisements placed in local newspapers would announce the artist's arrival and the availability of portrait sittings, often for a limited time. Potential clients would then contact the artist to schedule an appointment. The sittings themselves were typically conducted in the client's home, providing a familiar and comfortable setting for the sitter, and allowing the artist to observe their environment, which might subtly inform the background of the portrait. The duration of a sitting could vary, but it was generally much shorter than the extended sessions required for formal studio portraits of earlier eras. Artists developed techniques to work more efficiently, often sketching the basic composition and proportions first, then focusing on capturing the essential features and expression. Many employed a method of blocking in the major areas of color and light, returning later to refine details and add the subtle nuances that brought a likeness to life. The skill lay not only in accurate representation, but also in the ability to imbue the subject with a sense of personality and character, often capturing a moment of quiet dignity or a characteristic expression. The range of subjects was broad, reflecting the social strata of the communities they visited. While some artists might capture the stern visage of a local judge or the refined features of a doctor's wife, many more would find their clients among farmers proudly posing with their families, prosperous merchants wanting to commemorate their success, or young couples seeking to document their early married life. The size and complexity of the portrait would often be dictated by the client's budget. A simple head and shoulders portrait in a relatively small format would be more affordable than a larger 3/4 length or full-length depiction, especially if it included elaborate backgrounds or multiple figures. The artist, being a shrewd businessman, had to be adept at understanding the financial capacities of their clientele and offering a range of options. The economics of the profession were diverse. Prices could range from a few dollars for a small, unframed headshot to $50 or more for a larger, more detailed portrait, unframed. This might seem modest by today's standards, but it represented a significant sum for many families, often equivalent to several weeks' wages for a laborer. The artist needed to account for the cost of materials, travel expenses, lodging, and the inevitable periods between commissions when income might be uncertain. Therefore, a degree of financial prudence and resourcefulness was essential for survival. Some artists might also offer smaller studies or less elaborate likenesses as a more accessible option, thereby broadening their potential customer base. The artist's ability to negotiate and to offer value was a critical component of their success. The itinerant artists also played a subtle but important role in the dissemination of artistic styles and techniques. As they traveled from region to region, their work, though often executed in a straightforward representational style, carried echoes of academic training or contemporary artistic trends. Their paintings, displayed in homes across the country, served as visual touchstones, exposing local populations to different approaches to composition, color, and rendering. While they may not have been at the vanguard of avant-garde movements, their work contributed to a broader visual literacy and a sustained appreciation for the art of portraiture across the American landscape. Moreover, the lives of these artists were often deeply intertwined with the social fabric of the communities they served. They were not mere transient tradespeople. They became temporary fixtures, engaging in conversation, sharing news from other towns, and observing the rhythms of local life. Their presence could inject a small element of excitement into the routine of a small town. They often found themselves as confidants, listening to stories and interpreting the aspirations of their subjects onto canvas. This personal connection was a vital part of their marketing, fostering trust and encouraging commissions. The materials and techniques employed by these artists, while perhaps less refined than those of their studio-bound counterparts, were nonetheless crucial to their success and the longevity of their work. Oil paints, the medium of choice for most portraitists, offered a rich palette and a luminous quality that was highly valued. The preparation of canvases was often a meticulous process. Artists might stretch their own linen or cotton duck fabric onto wooden stretcher bars, applying a gesso ground, a mixture of chalk or gypsum and glue, to create a smooth, absorbent surface for the paint. This preparation was essential for ensuring the adhesion and durability of the oil paint. The pigments themselves were derived from a variety of sources, both natural and, increasingly, synthetic. Earth pigments like ochre for yellows and browns, umber for dark browns, and sienna for reddish browns were widely used. Other minerals provided vibrant colors: vermilion for reds, malachite for greens, and lapis lazuli for the prized ultramarine blue, though this was often prohibitively expensive. The development of synthetic pigments in the 19th century, such as cadmium yellows and reds, cobalt blues, and viridian greens, offered artists a wider and more consistent range of colors. The binders for these pigments were primarily linseed oil, pressed from flaxseed, which provided a durable and flexible film when dry. Turpentine, a solvent distilled from pine sap, was used to thin the paints and to clean brushes, while other oils like poppy seed oil might be used for lighter colors to prevent yellowing over time. The artist's mastery of these materials was paramount. They needed to understand the drying times of different pigments, the way oils and solvents interacted, and how to mix colors to achieve the desired hues and tones. The skillful application of glazes, thin, transparent layers of color applied over a dried underlayer, allowed for the creation of subtle transitions, luminous skin tones, and deep, rich shadows. The process of creating a likeness was often a careful balancing act between artistic vision and client satisfaction. While many artists strove for a degree of idealization, softening imperfections, and presenting their subjects in their best light, the core of their work was rooted in observation. They would meticulously study the contours of a face, the set of the eyes, the curve of the lips, and the tilt of the head. The subtle nuances of expression, a hint of a smile, a thoughtful gaze, a stern set of the jaw, were what transformed a mere representation into a living portrait. The backgrounds of these portraits were often kept simple, to avoid distracting from the subject. A plain, often dark, studio curtain or a softly rendered landscape, perhaps a distant suggestion of the sitter's farm or garden, were common. This focus on the figure was practical for an itinerant artist, as complex or detailed backgrounds required more time and materials. The overall effect was to draw the viewer's eye directly to the individual being depicted, emphasizing their presence and personality. The business acumen of these artists was as important as their technical skill. They had to be adept at self-promotion, negotiation, and managing their finances. Advertising in local newspapers was a common practice. These advertisements were often concise, announcing the artist's arrival, the limited duration of their stay, and the types of portraits offered. Phrases like "fine portraits painted," "likeness guaranteed," or "special rates for a limited time" were typical. Many artists also relied on a system of referrals. A satisfied client would enthusiastically recommend the artist to their friends and neighbors, creating a steady stream of business. The contractual agreements, though often informal, were crucial. An artist might take a deposit up front to cover the cost of materials, with the balance payable upon completion and approval of the portrait. The artist needed to be sensitive to the client's expectations and to be able to deliver a likeness that was both accurate and pleasing. If a client was not satisfied, a skilled itinerant artist would often be willing to make adjustments, or, in rare cases, to offer a refund, recognizing the importance of maintaining a good reputation within a community. The itinerancy itself presented unique challenges. Constant travel meant dealing with unpredictable weather, the wear and tear of roads on their vehicles, and the need to find lodging and sustenance in unfamiliar places. Artists had to be resourceful often becoming adept at repairing their wagons, caring for their horses, and finding affordable accommodations. For some, the automobile became a transformative element, allowing them to cover greater distances more quickly and to carry more supplies. However, early automobiles were also prone to breakdowns, and road conditions in rural areas could be challenging. The social mobility offered by this profession was a significant draw. While the artists themselves might not achieve the fame or fortune of their metropolitan counterparts, they were able to earn a respectable living, travel the country, and interact with a wide cross-section of American society. For women artists, in particular, itinerancy could offer a degree of independence and economic opportunity that was often limited in other fields. They could build their own businesses, manage their own finances, and escape the constraints of traditional domestic roles. The decline of the itinerant portrait artist as a dominant force in American art was a gradual process, largely brought about by technological advancements and changing economic conditions. The widespread availability of affordable, high-quality photography in the early 20th century, particularly with the advent of box cameras and roll film, began to erode the demand for painted portraits among the broader population. Photography offered a quick, accurate, and relatively inexpensive way to capture a likeness, and the novelty and accessibility of the camera rapidly made it the preferred method for most families seeking to document themselves. Furthermore, as the American economy shifted and urbanization accelerated, the traditional community structures that supported itinerant artists began to change. People moved to cities in greater numbers, and the pace of life quickened, leaving less time for the leisurely process of commissioning and sitting for a portrait. The rise of department stores and mail-order businesses also introduced new forms of commerce that competed for the consumer's dollar. Despite the eventual decline of their profession, the legacy of the itinerant portrait artists remains. Their works, found in attics, antique shops, and the collections of descendants across America, offer invaluable glimpses into the lives of ordinary people from a bygone era. They are more than just likenesses. They are testaments to the enduring human desire to be seen, to be remembered, and to leave a tangible mark upon the world. Each brushstroke, each carefully rendered feature, tells a story of aspiration, of family, and of a life lived in a time when the creation of a painted portrait was a significant undertaking, a deliberate act of self-preservation, and a reflection of one's place in the world. The social context of the early 20th century was crucial to understanding the itinerant artist's niche. America was a nation in transition, a vast country still largely populated by rural communities and burgeoning small towns. While industrialization was transforming the urban centers, the rhythms of life in many parts of the country remained tied to agriculture and local economies. In this environment, portraiture, once a symbol of wealth and status primarily for the European aristocracy, was beginning to democratize, albeit gradually. For the aspiring middle class, successful farmers, small business owners, and professionals, a painted portrait was a way to signal achievement and to establish a sense of permanence in a rapidly changing world. The artists themselves were often characters of interest in these towns. Their arrival could be an event, a break from the ordinary. They brought with them news from the outside world, tales of other places, and a different perspective. They were often welcomed into homes and community hubs, their presence signifying an appreciation for art and culture, even in the most modest settings. This social integration was not merely a pleasant byproduct of their work, it was a crucial element of their business strategy. Building rapport and trust was essential for securing commissions. The economic model of the itinerant artist was inherently entrepreneurial. They were independent contractors, responsible for their own marketing, sales, and production. This required a keen understanding of their target market, their pricing strategies, and their cost of doing business. Many artists developed a repertoire of standard poses and compositions that could be adapted to individual clients, increasing their efficiency. They had to be adept at assessing the financial capacity of their potential patrons, offering different sizes and levels of detail to suit varying budgets. A small, unframed head and shoulders portrait would be significantly more affordable than a larger, 3/4 length depiction with a carefully rendered background, the tools of their trade were carefully chosen for portability and durability. Easels that could be quickly set up and dismantled, compact sets of brushes, and tubes of oil paint that were less prone to drying out were essential. Many artists carried their own portable palette, and perhaps a small sketch pad for preliminary drawings or studies. The ability to pack and unpack their entire operation efficiently was a mark of their professionalism and their understanding of the demands of itinerancy. The process of securing a commission often began with the artist's arrival in a new town. They would typically spend a few days establishing a presence, perhaps by posting notices in general stores, placing advertisements in the local newspaper, or even by showcasing some of their completed works in a public space. Word of mouth was arguably their most powerful marketing tool. A satisfied customer's recommendation carried immense weight in close-knit communities. Once a potential client expressed interest, the artist would arrange for a sitting. This would usually take place in the client's home, providing a comfortable and familiar setting. The artist would observe the subject, discuss the desired pose and format, and perhaps take preliminary sketches. The sittings themselves were generally much shorter than those of earlier portraiture traditions. Artists had developed techniques to capture likenesses efficiently, focusing on key features and expressions. The goal was to create a pleasing and recognizable representation, rather than a painstaking, hyper-realistic rendering. The range of subjects was as diverse as American society itself. While some artists might secure commissions from the local doctor, lawyer, or minister, the majority of their clientele likely came from the ranks of successful farmers, shopkeepers, and tradespeople. These individuals, while not part of the wealthy elite, often had a degree of prosperity and a desire to commemorate their accomplishments and their families. A portrait was a tangible symbol of their hard work and their contribution to the community. The materials used were, for the most part, standard for oil painting of the era. Linen or cotton canvas, stretched and primed with gesso, formed the support. The pigments, a mix of earth colors, mineral pigments, and increasingly synthetic pigments available in tubes, provided the color. Linseed oil was the primary binder, with turpentine used as a solvent for thinning paints and cleaning brushes. The artist's skill lay in their ability to mix these materials effectively to achieve the desired color, texture, and luminosity. The artistic style of many itinerant artists tended towards a straightforward, representational approach. While they might have been influenced by the prevailing artistic trends of their time, their primary objective was to capture a recognizable likeness. This often resulted in portraits that were sincere and unpretentious, capturing the character and personality of their subjects without excessive embellishment. The backgrounds were typically kept simple, often a plain studio curtain or a subtly suggested landscape, to keep the focus firmly on the sitter. The financial arrangements could vary. A deposit was often required to cover the cost of materials and to secure the commission. The balance would be paid upon completion and approval of the portrait. The artist's reputation for fairness and satisfaction was paramount. In a small town, word of a displeased customer could quickly spread, impacting future business. Therefore, most artists were highly motivated to deliver a product that met or exceeded client expectations. The challenges of itinerancy were considerable. Constant travel meant exposure to the elements, the wear and tear on vehicles, and the necessity of finding suitable lodging and food in unfamiliar locations. Many artists became adept at basic vehicle maintenance, horse care, and finding affordable and safe accommodations. The transition from horse-drawn wagons to automobiles in the early 20th century represented a significant shift, offering greater speed and range, but also introducing new mechanical challenges and a reliance on evolving infrastructure. The social mobility offered by this profession was a significant aspect of its appeal. For individuals who may have lacked the means or the connections to pursue formal artistic careers in major cities, itinerancy provided a viable path to economic independence and a life centered around their artistic pursuits. It allowed them to travel, to see different parts of the country, and to interact with a wide variety of people. For women artists, in particular, Itinerancy could offer a degree of autonomy and a means of earning a living that was often difficult to achieve in more conventional settings. The decline of the itinerant portrait artist was a gradual but inevitable consequence of societal and technological changes. The widespread availability of affordable and increasingly sophisticated photography became the primary factor. As cameras became more accessible, particularly with the advent of Kodak's box cameras and roll film, the demand for painted portraits among the general population began to diminish. Photography offered a quick, accurate, and relatively inexpensive way to capture likenesses, and the novelty and practicality of the camera rapidly made it the preferred choice for most families. Furthermore, the accelerating pace of urbanization and the increasing mobility of the population meant that the traditional, close-knit communities that had supported itinerant artists began to shift. People moved more frequently, and the demand for long-term, personalized artistic services in scattered rural areas decreased. The rise of mass-produced goods and new forms of commercial entertainment also competed for the consumer's attention and disposable income. Despite their eventual decline, the works of these itinerant artists continue to hold significant historical and cultural value. Their portraits provide invaluable visual records of individuals and families from a bygone era, offering insights into the fashion, the hairstyles, and the everyday lives of ordinary Americans. They are tangible connections to the past, testaments to the enduring human desire for self-expression and remembrance. Each painting, with its unique brushstrokes and its carefully captured likeness, tells a story of aspiration, of family, and of a life lived in a time when the creation of a painted portrait was a significant undertaking, a deliberate act of self-preservation and a reflection of one's place in the evolving American tapestry. The quiet dedication and practical artistry of these traveling painters enriched the visual landscape of America in ways that are only now being fully appreciated. They were, in their own way, chroniclers of the American soul, capturing the faces and the stories of a nation in transition, one town at a time. Their legacy lies not in grand pronouncements or revolutionary artistic theories, but in the honest, heartfelt representations of the people who made up the fabric of early 20th century America.